What's going on YouTube? I'm Nick the Tutor, and this channel is dedicated to improving your SAT, ACT, and AP scores. Today we're going to talk about the 2021 APs. I'm going to break down what the hardest APs were. I'm going to talk about what students were saying, what you guys were saying about the AP exams this year. Now look, if you disagree, if you thought this exam was easy and I tell you it's hard, comment down below, let me know what you think, because I always want to hear what you guys have to say. Once again, if you can drop a like on this video, it would be greatly appreciated. It helps us out a lot. If you want to subscribe to the channel, we would greatly appreciate it to get more of this content about SAT, ACT, and AP exams. But today, once again, I want to talk to you about this year's AP. So what we did was, we went online, we reviewed student comments on various websites. We also spoke to some of our own students, polled you guys, and we wanted to know basically how the APs went this year for you. So what we did was we compiled what we think were the 5 hardest AP exams, and we're going to talk about why they were hard and what you guys said about it. This is great for students who are trying to choose their AP exams for next year, because what you're looking at is a snapshot of what was difficult and what people had success with, and also what people found to be troubling on this year's APs. All right, first exam that people thought was very, very difficult was Physics C. The reason that people thought Physics C was hard this year was that they felt the multiple choice section basically took too long. There was not enough time to complete the questions. They were a little bit too tricky, too convoluted, and students were struggling to get through that. So many of the students that we spoke with and we read about online stated that they felt they could not finish the multiple choice section in the proper amount of time. A lot of students reported that they had to guess on the last few questions, that they just weren't able to finish it, which severely reduced their score, and a lot of instances maybe changed a 4 to a 3 or a 3 to a 2. Now that said, those were not as bad as the open response questions. Students felt that they were extremely challenging and probably too difficult for what they had done in the past. Some students stated they were only able to get through half or 60% of the questions before time ran out, which is going to severely lower their score. Many students felt that overall there was not enough time to complete what they were asking you to do. Now look, this may have been part of their strategy with the half online exams to make them kind of excessively difficult, so people didn't have time to look up the answers. That's probably what that was about, but it still affected a lot of students that legitimately tried to complete the test. So yeah, Physics C ended up being really hard. For those of you thinking about taking it next year, something to consider. Exam number 2 that people felt was really difficult this year was English Literature and Composition. Students felt that the passages on this exam were excessively difficult, and they were way more difficult than the passages they have done on practice tests and on past years of the exam. Students felt that basically it was just a higher reading level and it was really hard to get through them. Students also felt that the questions that they were asking about these passages were extremely in-depth. So you have a hard passage that you're struggling to understand, then you have really detailed, in-depth questions about that passage, and that was kind of a recipe for disaster for a lot of students. That said, many students found other parts of that exam to be pretty simple. The essay section of the exam was deemed to be pretty easy because students were allowed to choose what they wanted to write about for some of the prompts, which enabled students to basically write about the books they were reading in school that year, which made things a lot easier. That said, students did struggle on the poetry passage. They felt that it was excessively difficult. Look, if you disagree with that, comment down below. Let me know what you think about this exam, what you thought about the exam, what you thought about the poetry passage, if it was too difficult or not. Let me know. That said, at the end of the day in this exam, there was definitely a balance of difficult stuff and doable stuff. By the end of the day, some of the difficult stuff students felt was extremely difficult. Exam number 3 that students found difficult, chemistry. People once again found that there was not enough time to complete the multiple choice section of the exam. There literally was just not enough time to get through all the questions. Many of them were too long-winded to complete in the allotted time, and a lot of students did not complete the exam. Did you complete it? Let me know. For the free response questions, students did feel that those were doable, mainly because the main topic on one of those questions was acids and bases, which is a topic that is commonly tested on the exam and most students are extremely familiar with. That said, the multiple choice section was deemed to be too broad, so students felt that it covered a large number of topics that they normally were not studying and were not covered in their class in school, especially with COVID. Many of these subjects were not touched on, and that made the multiple choice section very difficult, whereas the free response questions were fair. People deemed them to be fair in the sense that they were about topics that were familiar to the students, which was nice to see. That said, overall, not enough time to complete the questions on the exam, but once again, like I said, that may have been the design of the test this year, because of COVID. All right, exam number 4 that students found to be excessively difficult, Physics 1. Now look, people thought overall that the multiple choice section of this exam was pretty fair. The topics were topics that students were familiar with. Yes, it's a hard test in general, so some of the questions were difficult, but students felt that that portion of the exam was fair in general. That said, the more open-ended questions were extremely difficult. Students reported only being able to do, on average, about 3 out of 5 of the questions, which was pretty tough. Students just found that the topics were things that they didn't cover and the questions were too difficult. If you took this exam, let us know how many you thought you could do, but 3 out of 5 typically is not something that makes a student feel super comfortable, like if they're only able to answer 60% of an exam. That's not the best feeling. So students found that portion of the exam to be like way too hard, whereas the multiple choice they felt was easy to medium difficulty, but that drastically impacts a student's impression of the exam, so people overall found this exam to be extremely difficult. All right, exam number 5 that students found extremely difficult this year, European history. Students found that the stimuli on the multiple choice questions and the questions in general were not accurate enough or giving enough information for the students to answer the questions. That may once again be a COVID related thing. Maybe they were trying to make the exam difficult because they didn't want people to cheat if they're taking the exam online. But generally speaking, students found those questions to be excessively difficult and touching on a broad range of topics. Once again, this is a theme, right? You could see that the theme between the difficult exams is that the multiple choice sections seem to be too broad, and the fill-in or long response questions on these tests seem to be too detailed or too difficult. On top of that, many students ran out of time on these exams. Students also felt on the Euro exam that the short answer questions were exceedingly difficult and that students did not have the background knowledge and the sources did not provide enough information for students to answer the questions. That said, students found the DBQs and other essays to be somewhat doable, and those were not, terribly difficult or shocking. But, the multiple choice section and the short response section, students found to be extremely challenging on this exam. Overall, students found these exams to have some common themes that were difficult. Time management seemed to be a concern. Many of the students that I spoke with and students that we've worked with felt that that was a concern over the course of these exams. The other thing was that the topics covered seemed to be extremely broad. They may have been more broad than your teacher covered in your class. Is that College Board's fault? Maybe not. Does that relate to COVID, school, and hybrid learning? Possibly. So, combine those factors together and you have a recipe for some really difficult tests. Once again, utilize this information to pick your classes for next year. Yes, AP exams are hard, but they can really benefit your college application. Look, throw me a comment below. What AP exams are you taking next year? Did this video help you pick those exams for your upcoming school year? Once again, thanks a lot. I'll see you guys soon. Peace.